Good morning, everybody. It's Josie. Welcome back to Cedar Creek Homestead. I hope you're having a beautiful morning here at Cedar Creek. It's quiet. The Blades went off to work. The babies are still asleep. Cheyenne's doing her homework. And the air conditioning hasn't kicked on yet. And I'm out here enjoying the sounds of the farm. The cows were just in this pasture just a little bit ago, and so I was enjoying watching the mamas with their babies and watching the little ones jump and play and buck, and they are having a good time. The birds are singing to us, and I'm just enjoying the morning. But I'm sitting out here. Of course, you guys can't see it, but all around you, around back behind you, are plants and different little projects that I'm working on. And I thought that we'd talk a little bit this morning about volunteer plants and plants that you can start without spending any money, just simply by taking cuttings of your plants, or maybe your neighbors or your church family members will share with you and you with them, and not a lot of money has to be spent at all. So I've been weeding my garden and around the garden, and we laid down the garden fabric last year, and it's been a wonderful thing. It has really cut down the weeds, and I did that because we have that terrible morning glory, wild morning glory, bindweed, whatever you want to call it, and it gets all over everything and just makes a horrible mess. And so we got that, and things went really well. And of course, those of you that have been with us for very long, know that we had a terrible drought here in Oklahoma last year, as well as some other states. And by August, our garden was just really burned up. We had to make some decisions on what we could really do with water, because not only did the garden need water, but our creek went dry, bone dry. The ponds went dry. I showed you standing in the pond how dry it was. And we have livestock, cattle, and so we were having to, put out tanks of water for them. And so it was beginning to be really pricey on what we could afford between the cattle and the gardens and the flower beds and all the different things, that we had to make some really difficult decisions. And then at the end of August, Cheyenne went into early labor with little Rowdy. And as you know, we had to spend the month of September in the Children's Hospital in Tulsa. And so the garden was just done for. And it just sat there. Nobody was there to attend to it. And so not in the areas where we had the weed suppression cloth down, it didn't get weedy there. Stuff just died because it didn't have any water. But in the other areas around the edges of the garden, and in the areas that we hadn't put the cloth down yet, the weeds took over. And so this year in the spring, boy, did they ever spring up. And I've got a mess out there, not necessarily in the places with the ground cloth. I did have to pull weeds in the holes that we made to plant things, of course, but those were so much easier than what we went through in the past with trying to weed things. But I do have places in the garden where the cloth isn't there that I'm going to have to knock those weeds down, and I'm going to lay ground cover on those, let the ground cover do its thing as far as killing those things out. They're deep-rooted weeds, and some of them pasture weeds, and so they hold on tight. And so I'm going to let the ground cloth do its thing, weed suppression cloth, do its thing. I won't be making any holes to plant anything in those, but I will allow my pumpkins and my cantaloupe and watermelon to vine that direction and grow on top of that weed cloth ground cover, so that they have space to go, and they're sitting on clean surface, and I won't have to worry about weeds growing in amongst those. That'll be, it's going to be a work. I'm out there about every day working on as much of it as I can until it's too hot. But I found some treasures out there digging through the weeds. I found on two different rows. I found some tomato plants, one in each row, and one of them has a pretty good sized tomato on it, getting ready to ripen. And I was tickled to death when I found those. And then I had like 3 or 4 rows of different types of beans. I had green beans, red ripper cowpeas. I had jade beans. I had something else. I can't remember exactly what it was now. Knuckle beans. And some of those didn't do very well last year coming up, but the cowpeas done excellent. And I have found about 15 or 16 cowpea plants that are looking beautiful. And so I am thankful for those and looking forward to, I love cowpeas, and I'm looking forward to those as well. And then all over there in that weedy mess that is not on any of the ground cover at all, it's just on bare ground that the weeds have come up. In amongst all of that, I was traipsing through there to see what kind of mess I had to pick up. And lo and behold, there was a squash plant with big, yellow, beautiful blooms on it. Don't know which kind it was because I planted several different ones last year. I don't know if I have. It looks like either a zucchini or a yellow squash. I had lemon squash as well, but I think that the blooms are too big for the lemon squash. But anyway, the Lord is so good to provide those beautiful volunteers. And then on the onion row that I had last year, there was some onions left there towards the end of the row in the shady part, forgotten. In that drought and in the mess that we had with little Rowdy in the medical emergency that we had, there are some onions with big seed heads on the top of those. So I'm going to be able to take advantage of those as well. And I'm so excited to have that. I have always been one that has enjoyed the volunteers. Now, I had a volunteer tomato plant coming up in the backyard, and I forgot to say anything about it. So when Blade mowed, I noticed that he mowed that little tomato plant over, but it'll be all right. I've got so many tomato plants. It's ridiculous how many tomato plants I've got. But anyway, we've got some little trees that have been transplanted here by some little birdie, and their kindness left us a big surprise, or some squirrels. Now, they are very good at helping plant walnuts and pecans. We actually have a big pasture right here behind the house, one of our big pastures, really all over the farm. But in this particular pasture, we have some huge old pecan trees. And so we're all the time finding pecan sprouts. And we have one walnut tree in my yard. I don't know about out in the woods, but in my yard I have one walnut tree. And the squirrels are so faithful to go through and plant little walnut trees all over my yard and all my flower beds, and I have to keep pulling walnut trees out. I don't want them in the flower beds because the walnut trees put off a chemical that actually keeps things underneath the tree itself from growing. Now, there are some things that'll grow if you've got walnut there. Rose of Sharon will grow really well. Lilac bushes will just sit there and not do anything. I've got a whole row of lilacs up in my front garden, and that I planted, that I didn't know that walnut trees did that. And those lilacs have just sit there for years, just little bitty. And I never could figure out what in the world was going on until I read an article about the walnut trees and realized that that's what's stunning the growth of the lilacs. And so Cheyenne and I will be moving those to other locations because the walnut is a great big shade tree, and we can plant stuff in there that'll get along with the walnut tree, but the lilacs just don't get along. And so we'll move them to other locations. Lilacs put up a bunch of little new lilac bushes every year, and so we have plenty for ourselves and probably several neighbors that if they wanted any lilacs. I remember being in the garden with Howie, and I don't remember what row I was working on, but Howie was in the okra. And we had a beautiful stand of okra, and he was going down through there. And I wasn't really paying much attention, although I knew he was thinning the okra. But I kept out of the corner of my eye seeing him just really working and really going to town on the okra row, and it began to aggravate me just a little bit. And it kept going and kept going and kept going, and the pile was getting bigger and bigger of the little okras that he was thinning out. And I was just beside myself because I couldn't stand. Here these little seeds worked so hard to grow, and he was thinning them out. And it was a good thing for them to be thinned. They needed to be thinned. And we kind of got fussy with one another. I hate to admit that we were fussy over okra, but we did get a little bit fussy at one another. It didn't last long, but it didn't change his mind about thinning them out, and it was a good thing. But I thought about those okras, and I tried to get him to start a new row with the little okra seedlings, but he didn't do it. Now, there are a few things that come up volunteer that we wished wouldn't. One of them that I planted years ago, and it continues to come back every year and can be a nuisance. They were supposed to be sterile. They weren't supposed to be heavy cedars. Was the morning glory, not the wild morning glory, but I think this is I have a purple one and I have a double pink, and they come back every year. In fact, I've got one growing on my fence that I can see, and it's probably grown, I don't know, it seems like it's grown a foot overnight, and it's starting to reach a flower pot that I have hanging, and it'll wrap all over it and take it over. And so I know that particular part of that morning glory is going to have to be tore out. Cheyenne does not like it at all. She has a little area that she thinks will be okay for it, but we have it growing, and it's getting close to some of our little slicing tomatoes, and it's going to be a problem. So I will take that out. So not every volunteer is a good volunteer. I also have a patch of Malabar spinach that comes back every year, and I'm going to try to dig that up and move it. I can't keep it all because it can get invasive if you're not careful. You need to put it in a dedicated spot, and where it's at, it has reached my gate, and it hasn't this year, but last year it wrapped around the gate that goes into the backyard, and it gets to where it tries to bind it up, and so that'll have to come out. So that one, is an okay volunteer to come back, just if it comes back in the right spot. And we have to be diligent to make sure that those things don't become an issue. And I realize that I can't keep every single thing. Some things just have to be thinned. Some things are just not good. And I've brought things home from town before that I thought would be a good match here on the farm, and do some research on them and find out that they're not good for your livestock, that they're actually a danger to livestock, or they could be that they're attracted to, certain pests are attracted to them. Besides the volunteers, you have lots of plants and bushes around, and flowers and other vegetation that you can take cuttings of and root them. I have a rooting hormone that I like to use if I'm going to root them in dirt. I'll dip the end of the plant in this, and I will plant it, and I don't put it out in the harsh sun. I let it sit here on the back porch. We have filtered light, and during the morning it gets pretty bright light, and then as the day goes by, this is the east side of the house, and so of course the sun's going that way, and so I feel like they're safest here on the back porch, and I let them go for a while until they have a pretty good strong root, and then you've got another plant, and I love being able to do that. But I don't always grow them in the dirt in rooting hormones. Sometimes I will stick them in water, and I have success with both. Some plants I'll try part of my rescue if they've gotten broken or something's happened with them. Sometimes I'll put part of them in water and part of them in rooting hormone, just to see which one I have better luck with. And I do a whole variety of different plants that way. Sometimes I have great success, sometimes they're failures, sometimes they just don't work so well. One of the easiest ones is elderberry, and I have starts here on my shelf over to the left that I have, and they are starting to put on their buds and showing signs of being ready to put in dirt, and I will pop those up and put them in a location that they can get sun and continue to grow on so that they'll be ready to plant out. I always wait until they're strong enough before I put them out in the sun, and I try to put them in a place where I get morning sun, afternoon shade. This is coleus. Shine and I have some coleus that got kind of leggy. We planted it, but the top of it was really leggy, and so she did as I did with Howie and the okra. She cringed when I pinched the tops of them off. She thought that I had ruined the plant, and I had to say at first it looks kind of sad because you go from this big tall plant to, you pinched it off, and so I pinched it off, and it's growing. It's in a hanging pot, and when it recovers, I'll show it to you. I'll show you what it looks like. It's looking a lot better. I think she's feeling better about it. It's not bushy yet, but it's getting there. And these are the tops that I pinched off, and I can't stand to throw those away and say I'm done with these. There's not any value in them, and so I put them in water, and as you can see, well, that's a leaf that fell off, but they have nice little root systems, and they're ready to go. And so now we have more coleus plants to put out, and I've got had great success with coleus. If you've got coleus and you see that they're getting ready to flower, you may like the flower, but if you want it to grow and get bushy and reflush, pinch those flower heads off, and you can pinch some of the tops off, and they'll begin to branch again. And then you can use the tops that you pinched off to grow more. These will grow until fall. They're not winter hardy, but they'll grow till fall. I love all of the variety that you can get on coleus. And I'll just tell you that coleus is relatively cheap in the springtime when you buy them. If you buy them, we bought ours. I haven't ever gotten any coleus seed, but when you buy these, they usually come in a 6-pack. Unless you buy a big, pretty far along plant. You buy those little cell packs, those 6-packs, or some of them are 8-packs, and this one might have been an 8-pack. Then you get quite a few coleus in each one. There's not just one individual plant. There's quite a few, and so you have opportunity to make quite a display with just a little bit of money because they're relatively inexpensive, and you can see that they're very easy to root. Now, besides that, in there, I also have, this is a piece of my Vitex that I'm trying to root, and you can see that it does have a little piece of root here, or a little part where it's beginning to root, and it has this green. So I'm going to let this go just a little bit longer to see a stronger root system on this, and I'll plant this, and I'll have another Vitex here in the yard. I have another 2 or 3 cuttings of that, and they have just little tiny buds on them right there, just super tiny, but it's showing signs of life, and I don't want to throw that away. I want to see. It's a challenge to me, and I have another as well here. You can see that it's putting off the green, and it has a little bit of a root. And so I just, all summer long, I just kind of play around with these and other plants to see if I can grow some more. It's a fun project. It's a learning opportunity for us, and maybe we won't have the biggest harvest off of those things, but if we learn how to do these things, if we learn how to take cuttings and make new plants, and keep our volunteers when we see them. Don't tear them out if it's something that you want, like the morning Gore is coming out, but the tomato and the cowpeas and the different things like that, don't just rip those out because they're not in the right location. When I'm gonna finish getting that cleaned up there, oh, what a job. And I'll take you guys up there and show you the garden. The tomatoes are in, and finally the peppers are coming up and doing their thing, but they're still up here. They haven't been put in the garden yet, and we've got everything else is seed. I'm not putting any live plants up there except the tomatoes and the peppers. Everything else besides flowers, I have some marigolds to take up there. But I'll take you up there and I'll show you the volunteer tomatoes, the top volunteer cowpeas. And I had some mullein come up in the garden in different locations. And I didn't keep all of it because there was a lot come up. But in different rows, I kept a mullein plant. And I know some would be saying, that is a weed, take it out of there. But it has medicinal properties. It has properties for your respiratory system, and you can do things with that. Not a doctor. Do your own research on that. But I left those mullein. I can make some tea with that, and I'm just counting it as a victory, and looking forward to what this season can bring. So put yourself. I know a lot of you watch Roots and Refuge, and she talks about until you can get to your spot. Make your waiting room your classroom. Put your glasses on, so to speak, and get you a notepad and start working with stuff and see if you can't get it to propagate. And count the victory if you got a little bud. And then, even if you don't get a plant, then maybe next year you work on it and it gets a little bit better and a little bit better. I think that if we can find that we can save seeds and start new plants for ourselves and carry things over from year to year, that we'll be a little bit more secure in the things that we have and the things that we need. And I hope you guys have a blessed day. And until next time, guys, this is Josie. I love y'all, I really do. Keep looking well to the ways of your household. Look around for those volunteer plants and those opportunities to grow something new. Till next time, guys, we're gone.